Hi.
Hello.
Are you awake?
There's coffee at the back. I made some.
How many have a memory foam bed?
No.
Hello.
If we don't, is the department getting us one?
No, you don't want one.
In order to understand resiliency, we may need to. So yes, let's put it on our request list. The resiliency, one of the things about the memory foam is that it has a resiliency, and so mattresses, they used to put those foam toppers on them, and you slept on them for 3 months, and you knew where you slept because there was a dent, because there's no resiliency. We talk about resiliency, it's the ability of something to snap back into shape when something has been put against it or pressure is against it. And so when we talk about cultivating resiliency, the reason this is important to me is we're going to talk about the things that may happen when we've experienced crisis and the down the road, but if we on the front end, before we ever hit crisis, before we ever have the other part, are practicing things that help us cultivate resiliency, the chances of us going as far down when things have gone really wrong, or going off the charts up, or finding yourself in places or in situations that you don't want to be or nobody wants to be, or to be helpless to help the other people on the team when we need each other. And so resiliency has a value in not just keeping you healthy, not just keeping your homes and your families healthy, but also in keeping us as a team, as a group of people that are in scenes healthy, because at some point, if we've not cultivated taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be present for the people that need us. So that's the value, the reason we do it. And the way I kind of like to break this down into is that we, as human beings, are known to have 3 basic parts. So we have our outside part, our bodies. We have our minds, what thinks, the part of us that is think, and then the part of us that is the emotions, the feelings, the soul, the spirit. So lots of words to use for it, but we're triunes. There's parts of us that are obviously the hands, the feet, the body, and then there is our inside. So first I want to talk to you about body and taking care of your body. So some obvious ones are making sure we get enough sleep. I know it's the silliest thing, because when we say that, most of us, or all of us, have spent more than one sleepless night. So taking the naps, taking the extra places, scheduling naps when you're off. Sometimes, especially when we're young, the temptation is to go, we have a weekend and I just had a really hard week and I didn't sleep most of the time, and so I'm going to push through and do something really fun because that, yay, is going to pick me up. But scheduling sleep, exercise. Exercise is really good. Exercising before we need it. If you're waiting until it's time for a training or a research to take care of yourself, you're going to find yourself behind the ball game when you need to be there. If you're doing something regularly to take care of your strength, both strength and your endurance, you're going to find that you're going to have more to give when you need it. What you eat. One of the things that happens when we're on shift work, when we're on weird things, is you come home at 3 in the morning and what do you want to do? Grab the nearest bag of something that probably isn't great for you. This is Heather, perhaps not. But yeah, donut holes from Chaplain's. We tend to put things in our body when we're tired. And eat empty things and not watch what we're doing. Taking care of your body is really important for cultivating resiliency. Watching your blood pressure. It's a bad time to find out you have high blood pressure when you're dealing with the stress after a really bad incident or something that you've seen that's causing emotional trauma. How many know that the things that we see that are the physical are less impacting than the emotional part? So let me rephrase that. So often it's not how gory or how bad or how stinky. It's the attachment to emotions that actually drain you more or in a greater way than the actual what you've seen and the gore. So probably, how many people have had somebody say, oh, I don't know if I could do that? Because they're thinking of the what the picture is. You've got the body, you've got the throw up, you've got the different things that we see. But that actually isn't the thing that usually catches a person. It's when they're tired, they haven't taken care of their mind and their thoughts, and their spirit's a little on this part, or the emotional part is unstable and haven't cultivated resiliency, and then you find yourself plummeting. Not because of what you've seen usually, but because of what's attached to the emotions that are there. What are some other things that you can think of? Taking care of the body.
Nice hot shower.
Nice hot showers, yeah. Do that for the rest of the people. Yeah. Taking care of yourself. Any others that you can think of to take care of your body before you actually need it?
Trying to stay healthy,
Yeah.
so avoiding illness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Get-
doctor visits.
Yeah, doing your doctor's visits, keeping up on your screenings, making sure that you're physically doing the things to take care of yourself. Schedule it in so that you're actually thinking consciously about taking care of yourself and not waiting until it's not a good time. All right, thoughts, the mind. What can we do to cultivate resiliency in our mind?
Touch people out.
Awesome. Yes,
Meditation.
meditation is good. What else?
Have friends outside of fire and EMS.
Yes.
Think of a catch-all exercise.
Exercise does go back to helping the mind. Yeah. What about consciously talking to yourself?
So positive self-talk.
So yeah, I'm going to go with that one. Positive self-talk. And actually encouraging yourself and reminding yourself of why you're doing things, what you're doing, and taking care of thought processes. Sometimes if you find yourself going in these spins that go over here and over here, and you let that go, you may be able to rein it in for a long period of time, but if we're going to cultivate resiliency, we've got to make sure that when we have thoughts that start going out here with anxiety or with anger or some of these things, that we rein them back in and we get them home. What else? Learning. You guys are all doing it tonight. Learning is a really good one to actually keep the mind healthy. Learning new things, learning new skills, learning new ways to do things. Reading's a good one. Watching what you put in. If you've just seen 4 or 5 bad scenes, or you're seeing a lot of bad scenes, and you're not doing something to fill your mind with good news, you're going to find yourself pretty negative. Yeah.
What about like challenging your brain? Not like challenging it really hard challenging, but like brain exercises, like crosswords and things like that. Is that-
I have a whole bunch of them. I'm hoping they're working, but I'm not. I have a book of them. Yeah. Anything we can do to challenge our thoughts to make sure that we're safe and healthy. Inside of that, the other part of it is making sure that you have someone or someones that you can talk to about thoughts that would actually give you good feedback. Not shut up and suck it up, fuck it up, but would actually reflect back. Hey, did I just hear you say, I've said this to Ken, I'm done. And somebody that would actually look at you and say, talk to me about what done is. Where is done? So knowing and having something that you can actually talk to someone about the thoughts in your head and hear it reflected back. And spouses are pretty good at it, but sometimes they're not the best people. Sometimes it's really good to have somebody that's outside of your world and you reflect some thoughts of how you're thinking. And often they'll reflect how you're feeling, but we'll get into feelings in just a minute. The thoughts is just what you intentionally put your mind to do. Positivity, taking time to actually have hopes and dreams. How many here have made a 5-year plan for their life or have a 5-year goal? Some of us. When you actually think it through and you go, in 5 years I would like to, and you have it down, what does that do? That cultivates a hope and a resiliency, a future, a forward thinking. It helps you know, and it gives you a standard that you can actually say, is this step that I'm taking today, is this process that I'm doing today, is this thing that I'm going to embrace or add to my life, what is it gonna do for my 5-year goal? How about 2 years goals? Has anybody done 2-year goals? That's a little more doable. Good. All right, more heads. 2-year goals are good too. So you have that place. In 2 years, I'm planning on getting this paid off, moving this here, getting this here, buying a house, selling a house, downsizing, increasing, all of those things. Goals help us hope, and hope helps our minds cultivate resiliency. So hope is a really important thing. And finally, the inside, the heart, the emotion part. So anybody have some ideas or know what we can do for that?
Do stuff you love to do.
That's a really good one. That's a positive one. Yep. Schedule fun. I gave you the little 60-second the other night. Really important. Say no to something that just doesn't bring joy and is difficult or is impeding within reason. And then say yes to something. Yes to something that's going to bring joy or bring some hope. And then another one that really helps the emotions, it helps the mind, but it helps the emotion or the inside person, is to live grateful. Part of cultivating resiliency is actually living thankful. We see so many things. For me, it's always easy to come home and be thankful I'm alive. And I have a saying, and it's, my kids, I've always said this to them, not everybody lives through a bad day. And so thankful that we're alive, thankful that we have the breath, thankful that we have each other, thankful that we have our jobs, thankful that we have cars, thankful that we're not homeless, thankful that we have our families, our spouse, our children. Thankfulness, gratitude, and living in that actually builds a stamina inside of us that when big things comes, when waves crashes, if you've practiced it in the middle of it, you actually find yourself resilient. I'll tell you a story of my daddy. When I was 16, we were at the Oregon coast, and my dad was one who cultivated or taught me resiliency and actually taught me how to live gratefully. And I'll never forget, we got caught in a sneaker wave. The ambulance took us to the hospital. Mine was, my leg was crushed up to above the knee. His was just below the knee on the other side. We were on opposite sides. We'd saved my little sister, so that was awesome, but here we were laying, and he was on the curtain on the other side, and I listened, and I was sitting there, and I was not dealing with pain real well, and I heard his voice, and he's like, well, I guess we can be grateful it wasn't both legs. And I'm like, Dad, and then pretty soon he's like, well, guess we can be grateful. And he just started going through thing after thing after thing. And I just remember there, and I've watched my daddy. He's in his 80s now, and he's seen a lot of really yucky things. And one thing I know about him is he's always been grateful, and it's cultivated a resiliency in him that I don't know many people would have for as much as he's gone through. So gratefulness is one. Another one that's really important in taking care of that part of us is getting rid of bitterness, unforgiveness, grudges, unhealthy anger directed towards people, towards spouses, towards children. How many have ever resented a child? Okay. Spouses, once. The man that just cut you off in the intersection. Okay,
That's me.
My new pet peeve in Salem, because I'm driving in Salem more, as I pull over for the emergency vehicle that's going by, and all the people that cut me off and block him after I just pulled over, and I find myself in a rage that isn't pretty. And then I remember that I'm trying to not go to those places. So living with getting rid of grudges. And that's a more difficult thing. But in order to stay strong and healthy inside, it's important that we actually face some of the things that have been done to you, said to you, that you've felt, the things that haven't been done for you, you haven't felt, the things that seem or feel like they're lacking, and to actually address those. And sometimes this takes going to a counselor, talking to a chaplain. It can involve long periods of getting things done. It can be just taking care of it in yourself, making a resolve. I'm going to forgive. I'm going to release this. One of the questions I love to ask people, or ask myself if I find myself in it, but especially people that feel kind of trapped or stuck in angry grudges, is do you need the anger? Yeah. Okay, good. Then look at why we need that. Because there's usually a need that needs to be met, and that's the part where we can go, and to cultivate resiliency, we can say, what is the anger? What is the thing that I'm holding on to? And then figure out, why is it I feel like I need the anger at Joe, or at my wife, or at my husband? And then as we address those things, we can let go of that, let go of the anger. And we as people, as individuals, the way humans are built, we found that we're far more resilient when we have taken care of grudges. How many people have ever found themselves where they're stewing about a person and what they've said or done to you? Just me? Ken and I. Ken and I occasionally find ourselves a wee bit angry. And the things that do it are the small, minute things sometimes that we haven't taken care of. And often one thing that you haven't taken care of causes another thing, and you find yourself constantly angry or uptight. And there's a lot of energy used in keeping a grudge and maintaining that kind of anger inside of us. So we've learned that people that get rid of anger and deal with grudges, deal with those relational pieces, or those things that some of us have had unfair things, unjust things in our lives. And I know that I've had unjust things in my life. I'm sure you have. And there's things that just aren't fair. And there's no answer for them. And until you learn to release the grudge and not carry that around, you're not resilient. You actually can be knocked down very easily. And so taking care of anger, the grudges, the bitterness, unforgiveness, it is vital to staying resilient. Another thing for resiliency is cultivating what I call, develop the emergency plan. And one of the reasons why we want to do this in a resiliency place versus a responding is that if we've already got a plan in place, we can practice it before we ever need it. So, for instance, if I'm not feeling well, I have a plan, and poor Ken probably dreads when he gets a text from me, do you have a few minutes? But it's a good plan, and it works really well, because that's the start of my emergency plan. And so when I'm not feeling well, when there's something inside me that's lodged or stuck, I have a group of people I meet with. So I have actually within myself said, if I get to A, B, or C, I will call that group of people prior to the Tuesday mornings when I meet with them. And so in my resiliency plan, in my emergency action plan, I've actually made things that I'm going to do. If I begin to have anxiety, here's my three steps that I'm going to do. And so it's really important. It's like, how many have thought about, if I'm feeling anxiety outside of the norm, what you're going to do with it? I've seen it. So let's do it this way. I'm real kind of serious. How many people have an emergency plan for, that one just hit me, that scene just hit me really hard? 4 of us. Okay, so let's work on this. If you get to, and it's not like if it ever happens, it's when you actually hit that place or that time or that scene where anxiety is difficult and hard, and you find yourself ramped, or you find yourself depressed, you find yourself emotionally not feeling well, and you're the first one to know it. You need to have at least 3 steps. Step 1 could be, any thoughts?
Acknowledge it.
You've already acknowledged it. So after you've acknowledged it, step one, the first thing I will do now that I've acknowledged it is,
Talk about it.
Talk or remove yourself from whatever situation is causing it, if you can.
so presuming that that's been done and you woke up and you just found out that you've got the shakes and you don't even, you did nothing except go on a call last night and you've just found yourself 3 days in a row unable to get out of bed without having to do a lot of coaxing. And it's the beer in the refrigerator that coaxed you out. I've had bad days. It wasn't beer, but it's like that.
I talk with my kid.
There you
I
go.
spend time with my kid.
Okay. So the first person, I think it's really important to know who you're going to reach out to. So I think a really good one is to actually have a person or a group that you're going to call right away and say, I woke up yesterday and then again today. I was shaky and all I wanted to do was go back to bed and it took me half an hour to get myself put together. You need to call somebody and tell them. But you need to have the person. If you just go, yeah, I'll call somebody, you won't do it actually. Unless you have it written down, like it's the same thing as if we go in and we're looking for, do they have a do not resuscitate? It's the same thing. We're looking for a plan. This one is a resuscitation, and where do you go and who's the contact? Next one. So yeah, the second could be reach out to a peer, get into a group. It could be maybe you've been overly stimulated, you need to be alone, so you're gonna take time off. Or maybe it would be go back to work and get involved, but it would be involved in changing a position or making sure that you're doing something different, you're making a step. So for you, you're gonna have to know. For me, I can be really happy going and hiding out and nobody knows where I've been for a week and how are you, fine, thanks. And nobody knows. So I have to intentionally in my emergency plan go and put myself in proximity with people. But yours might be different. Maybe you've overdone it and your emergency plan is I'm going to go to the park and I'm going to spend 2 hours. And maybe it involves meditation, maybe it involves something else. And then a third one, after I've done that. These have your own creativity. You can borrow mine. Mine involves spiritual care, but it may not work for you. So
Pets.
maybe you're gonna
Your
need,
dog.
huh?
Your dog, your pets.
Maybe that's it, but yeah.
Or a health professional.
Or seek a health professional. There is nothing wrong with going to the doctor and saying, it's been a couple of days and I just hardly can get out of bed. My energy's down. I'm not feeling great. Huh. Maybe he'll say, you've got something wrong physiological that can be fixed. But maybe something else can be done.
You're talking about stuff that none of us want to admit weakness.
Really?
So,
Thank you, Carl.
Because
Right.
you admit you're weak,
Just give away.
no one's going to be wanting to hang around you because you're kind of like are you stable or are you?
You're not admitting you're weak, you're admitting that you're human.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
But that's a sign of weakness.
Makes you vulnerable.
but yeah, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable or weak.
There isn't.
There's not.
There's not. It's just that
That's a man's ego.
The problem is it's
it's not just
stigma.
men.
Well,
That's really good. So there is a stigma about mental health, about not crashing, about stand up, buck up, suck up.
Yeah, you see
Shut
it on
up, buck
Facebook
up,
all the time.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
lines is based-
Okay, so why do we have such a high suicide rate among first responders?
Because they bottle it up and keep it to themselves.
Because they buck up, suck up, cover up.
It'll go away.
The opposite of that is the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Ignore it, it'll go away.
Of course it will.
Take an aspirin.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, I'm talking about, so I'm doing this in the topic of, and I'm almost done, I'm watching the clock, in the topic of resiliency. And so in the process of being resilient is actually going, there is a good chance I'm going to wake up one morning and I'm not going to feel normal. And we're triunes. We have the thoughts, we have the emotional part, and we have the body. And they all get smushed together, and you're shaking, and it's all about what you're thinking, and your emotions are messed up. And you don't know how the heck to unspin yourself out of that. So resiliency is us cultivating or doing something proactively on the front end so that when that happens, we know how we're going to get out of it. It isn't saying it's not going to happen. It's not going to say that it's weak to know it's happening. That's just the fact of the matter. You may do it. And if you don't have a plan to deal with that, then you're going to be in a you're going to be in a lot of hot water.
Yeah, and it's something we should do because we like to pre-plan our incidents.
Right.
Our body's an incident. We
It
gotta
is.
make a pre-plan for this so we can function.
So another word for resiliency would be capacity.
Right.
So I think for this kind of stuff, it's like everyone thinks they're kind of, Superman until there comes a point where something's going to make you break and you don't know what it is. And it literally will hit you like a ton of bricks. Like for instance, like I went through about like 6 years of like doing EMS type work, stuff like that, never had like an issue with it mentally, anything, emotionally. One day driving home from work hits you, that's when it hit me. No traffic, nothing, just driving. It's weird. And then when you talk about resilience though, I think people that do this job are resilient as it is to be able to do this stuff every day. And it's the resiliency of being able to admit that you need help during your time of need. And the issue I think with this kind of stuff is like, no one knows what to do until it happens, right? Like you don't know what your plan is until you have it happen to you. And then it's okay, shit, this is going on. What do I do now? So I think it's, like you can have everything like planned out in your head and think of all the things and take all the classes. But until something actually like that happens to you, you don't know how to act on those emotions.
True. But people that have planned, that have thought it through and say, okay, when this happens, here's what I'm going to do, have a far better chance of coming back into the place and the form in a shorter amount of time with less disturbance. And so one of the things about first responder resiliency is that, have you ever taken a rubber band, and mine is pretty good tonight, and I didn't have one at home that did this, but you sit there and you get ready to put it on something because it is the right shape and it does seem to have elasticity, and so you pull it out, you wrap it around something, you get ready to do it, and then you're just about ready to let, and the thing pops. And so a lot of EMS resiliency is built on sheer determination and not because you've taken care of yourself. So it's really important that we understand that there is resiliency because I'm tough and I'm invincible and this is what I do and this is who I am. I am a responder. But true resiliency comes because inside you, your thoughts, you've taken care of your body, you've taken care of your thought process, and you've taken care of the emotional part of you. And that, when we cultivate that, you're actually proactive in taking care of yourself, means that when you get to that place and you wonder if it's going to break, hopefully it doesn't break. But yeah, last one, and kiss, my time's up.
I think to me a really important distinction from what we're talking about with the suck it up, cover up is in some ways that's resistance instead of resiliency.
Oh, absolutely.
Resistance is an attempt or working to prevent something from happening, whereas resiliency is allowing it to happen and recovering from it.
Right.
And that's what I would say about the not showing weakness. We're not allowed to show weakness, but by not showing weakness, we're trying to show hardness, and hardness will eventually break. Like that's just what hardness does.
But the reality is that if you allow recently I've had a couple conversations with folks who have found themselves on scene and just impacted by something and they're in tears. And they go like, I can't let them see me cry. And it's like, why not? Because crying is a perfectly normal, rational response to some of the crap that we see, right? It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of compassion and being there, and strength.
Yeah.
That you can stand there. So, Sam, what you said about not knowing what it's going to be like until you're there, but building that capacity beforehand, even if you don't follow that plan exactly, you've already built some additional capacity, some resilience in from the very beginning. And you're like, okay, so stuff happens, okay, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And then being able to either ask for help, like you said, or to reach out to somebody who you have connected to. That's a huge piece.
Any other? My time's done.
So we'll have a little bit of time at the end to kind of wrap stuff up and talk a little bit more. Russell? I'll go to Russell's slide.
Good evening, I'm Chaplain Russ Hilsinger, and I'm just thrilled to have some colleagues like Heather and Ken, Ted, and now Dennis with us. And it's just gratifying to work with such a great team. I'd like to share with you tonight a little bit about spiritual self-care, also sometimes referred to as soul care. We don't talk about that a whole lot in our culture today because much of our culture wants to just forget about anything kind of spiritual. We've just evolved, right? But we are spiritual beings, and you can't just sweep that under the table. If you look at your inner dashboard to do a self-check on yourself, it's pretty easy to check some of the things that we're really familiar about. For example, if you do a self-check on how you're doing physically right now, you could tell if you're tired or you're feeling really rested, energetic, that sort of a thing. And so you would have maybe a little gauge there, a proverbial gauge that says empty or full. And so let's say you're just exhausted. You're like on a 1 or a 2. What would you do in order to get that gauge to go up a little bit? How do you take care of yourself physically?
Drink more caffeine.
A little more caffeine. We hope a little shot there will help us. But you got to get some rest. How do you take care of yourself?
Say no.
Sleep.
You need some sleep. Sleep is an important thing for helping out our physical self, right? You might be just really hungry. You might need food. You might not need water. Oh, I was going to say, yes, I was going to say, yes, I see that hand. Mentally, we have a little gauge as well. We don't always audit our mental ability. You can get exhausted mentally. So if you're exhausted and your gauge is on 1 or 2 mentally, what do you do in order to feel a recharge? How do you go about doing that?
Kind of like what she was saying earlier, like playing something fun.
Got to do something fun?
Something to look forward to.
Okay.
Find something that feeds your soul.
Something that feeds your soul, thank you. We're going to be getting to that in just a moment.
Read a book.
A book, maybe we need to zone out a little bit. We don't want to make any decisions. We're not taking any SATs anytime soon. We're going to shut down the brain, give it a rest. We might go watch something. We might just take a nap, that sort of thing. It recharges us mentally. You can be exhausted mentally. And oftentimes it feels like you're exhausted physically. You can't even decide what you're going to make for dinner. Right? What am I going to do next? Don't ask me anything. But the question?
I know this is not a healthy coping mechanism in excess, but I feel like a lot of us go home and we'll crack a beer or something. I'm not drinking a ton to relieve stress, but in moderation, do you think that's okay?
I would say that's probably, okay, we're talking about moderation.
Yeah.
That'd be okay.
Not getting intoxicated, but like.
And we're gonna touch that. Now, if you're exhausted mentally, you're not gonna recharge your batteries by having a big dinner. Probably. You gotta do something to relax your brain. Now, there's another gauge on that proverbial dashboard that has to do with your spirit. We have spirits. And we don't often monitor that gauge. Through our spirit, we find universal acknowledgement of right and wrong. We have a sense of justice. It's our spirits that we understand who we are. We have a sense of beauty and wonder and hope. It's a non-material part of us. Philosophers can't deal with that because everybody, every generation, every culture is kind of dialed into those kinds of things. That didn't happen through evolution. That's something that I want to suggest to you that the Creator has put into us. And we oftentimes get to a place because we neglect our spiritual selves and we get out of gas. And so when you get out of gas spiritually, what are some of the things that you can do in order to recharge that gas tank?
Nature.
Some nature.
I think it depends on your religion, but depending on who you believe in or what you believe in, it could be prayer, it could be many things. It could be going to temple, it could be doing any sort of religious act to help find that spiritual guide.
Okay. Good. Good.
When I'm kind of going that drain, I read my Bible.
So we do some reading of the Bible. Okay, good. Frank?
I mean, kind of like Heather said, I kind of maybe go through a checklist of the things I'm grateful for and excited for in my life.
Good. You guys got kind of, what does it look like and what does it feel like when you're spiritually empty? What does that look like? If we can understand that, we'll be able to understand that this isn't a physical thing, it's not a mental thing, probably not an emotional thing, but we're actually touching on a spiritual realm here, and we need to take care of ourselves. What does that look like?
Lack of hope.
There's no hope. Thank you, good. What else?
There's no joy.
No joy.
Like a walking zombie.
A walking zombie. Good explanation.
I always tend to see people that are kind of in that point that they don't glow. But normally people, when I look at them, they glow. Like absolutely just depleted.
They don't look like they're really there. No glow, no shine. Okay? Good.
Losing interest in things.
No interest in things. It's not a mental, it's not a physical, it's a spiritual element. These are important. Oftentimes when people are there, what do? They medicate. Self-medicate oftentimes. What else?
Sam, what'd you say?
I said poor decision making.
Poor decision making. How about their relationships?
Crash and burns.
Crash and burn, discard,
Sense of apathy.
apathy,
Try to shut yourself off from the world.
isolation. Yeah. Angry at God? How about angry at self? Part of that too. If we don't take good care of our soul, if we're not dealing in the spiritual realm a little bit, all of those things will be part of our life. And it creeps up on us. We kind of drift along and we find ourselves in a very dark place. Some of you have probably been at that place We talked about some of the things that we can do. I want to make, okay, if you got a pencil and paper, I got 11 things I want to share with you real quick. 11 things that we can do that'll help nurture our spiritual well-being. Recommendations. In our culture today, we often live like we're going to a fire every day. The automobile of our life doesn't have a brake pedal, it only has a gas pedal. We like to go and go and go, and we think we're in a race. We always have to go faster, and then we wind up just crashing. So a lot of these things that Heather shared with us is going to have a little overlap. The first thing you guys have to do is you have to decide that you're going to stop. You got to find or build a brake pedal. You got to stop, find one day a week to disengage from all your doings. We think that if we do, we're accomplishing more and it makes us better. But we're not human doings, we're human beings. And so, one day a week, we need to be able to stop, disengage, don't feel guilty, and allow our soul to just relax a bit. Number 2, we have to learn to rest. It's one thing to have come to a full stop, but learning to rest is a hard thing for some of us. This involves expressing your joy. In other words, what do you do for fun? You got a day of rest, what are you going to do in it? You could sleep all day, but that might not be what you need. If you're depressed, that's what a lot of people do in their depression. You don't need to just spend more time in bed. You actually have to get out and express your joy a little bit. Do something that makes you happy. It could be working out, it could be taking the dog for a walk, it could be reading, it might be going to a movie, it might be a dinner out, but it's a change of pace. You're no longer doing what you always do, you're doing something different. And there's no expectations for the day. You're going to rest. And you're not going to feel guilty about it either. You're going to be purposeful about your relaxing. Stop and rest from the things on your day. You give yourself a break from work, a break from physical exhaustion, a break from hurriedness, a break from multitasking, a break from competitiveness. You give yourself a break from worry, decision-making, errands, talking, and yes, you got to give yourself a break from technology. Did you get that? Okay. Mr. Technology. Number 3, we need to delight ourselves in the wonder of creation, in your many blessings. You get to start counting them up. Somebody mentioned that earlier. You can count your abilities. You can count who you are. You can count your unexpected conversations with people, relationships that you have, your neighbors, your family, and your strangers. You can delight in all the things that you have. When you begin to delight in these things, it'll cheer your heart. It's a wonderful thing for soul care. Delight yourself. Number 4 on my list is contemplate. You need to stop and think fully or deeply about something. You can ponder the love of God. You can ponder the beauty that's around you. I mean, we live in Oregon. When's the last time you got to take a walk out to some beautiful place and just enjoy it? Enjoy a painting, an image, a vista, a friend. Soak yourself in some beautiful music. For some of you, that might be head-banging music, or it might be something pretty mellow. If you're an old guy like me, for sure it's gonna be mellow. Number 5 is do something restorative. There may be an offense that you have against someone or someone has against you. One good way for spiritual self-care is to make sure that you have short accounts. You need to go and apologize to that person, or you need to make that wrong right. So take some time out and do something restorative. Get right with him. You can extend grace to someone. You can extend an act of kindness. Doing those positive kinds of things, extending grace, will recharge your spiritual self. Number 6, you can pray. Reach out to God in prayer. Flee to God. Spend some time, try and find Him. If you're not a person of prayer, let me just recommend that you try it. Prayer is awful helpful for the soul. It's interesting, there was a poll a while back that there was a whole lot of people that didn't attend church. There was a whole lot of people that didn't believe in God. In fact, there are about 70% of Americans don't believe in a God. In fact, we have in God we trust in our money, and yet they want to take that off our money these days. They did a poll and they said 90% of the people pray. So when we get in a tough spot, that's what a lot of people do, even if they don't know who. Pray. Number 7, read and meditate. Find a good book. I want to recommend the Holy Scriptures. This is a source of nourishment for your spirit. Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone, but on every word that proceeds from the Father's mouth. I think there's truth in that. Read. Number 8, simplicity. Some of us need to declutter our life. My wife and I just went through downsizing. We had a big home, big shop, and 4 acres of ground, and I'm an old guy and hard time keeping up with it. So we decided that we're going to move to town, smaller house, smaller hunk of ground, a lot less stuff. I gave away trailer loads full of stuff. Simplicity, declutter your life and it feels a whole lot better. The more you have, by the way, the more you have to worry about. The more you have, the more you're worried someone's going to take. The more you have, the more it's going to require you to maintain it. Declutter your life. Don't be a hoarder. Number 9, practice solitude or silence. It's pretty hard to hear that still small voice when there's so much noise going on around you. Slow down, listen, solitude. Number 10, develop a spiritual friendship. The Bible says that 2 are better than 1. And a friend, you need to cultivate a friend. And I'm not talking about somebody's going to just pump sunshine up your face. You need to find a friend that can get in your face and say, look, pal, stop the pretending. You're just shining me on. You need that kind of a friend, an accountability partner, somebody that knows you well enough that can call your bluff and is willing to do it. And by the way, the kind of person that when you are crying, they're right there with you. When you are having a hard time, they're with you. A spiritual friend. And lastly, I want to suggest here's an ancient kind of spiritual technique. It's called journaling. There's something about writing down our thoughts and feelings and help create clarity and objectivity. So write out your thoughts and feelings, write out your prayers to God for a greater sense of closeness. Those are 11 things that I want to suggest. If you will do some of those things, or maybe all of them along the way, it'll cultivate a healthy spiritual self. It'll help charge your spiritual battery. It'll help the resiliency factor that Heather talked about. And it'll help you keep you from getting to the brink of total despair in your life. I want to give you some time for question and answer. If there's anything I can share with you here. You guys got that? That help? Okay. I'm your chaplain. You can call me, you can call any of us. We're here for you.
So, I have a question for you. You want to take a couple minutes break? Stand up, walk around, and have a glass of water. I don't think we want any food. So, we're going to take about 10 minutes, visit, just take care of yourself, and come back refreshed. There was not.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Did you take that path up the shirt yet?
Who have not met Dennis. So if you've been helping out with the recruit class in the academy at all, Dennis has been doing that.
We don't live where.
Gotta throw something.
Excuse me? Ken's voice wasn't heard very far.
Sorry, we're talking about hats. Sorry, Mr. Chaplain.
I didn't know our 10 minutes.
Talking
was
about
up.
beanies.
Yeah, beans.
Beanies have the floor right now.
So Dennis is going to give us a snapshot of your history. And Dennis is our newest chaplain, so he's joining us. He hasn't come on full board yet, but he is nearly there.
Well, I am Dennis Bean, and 46 years ago today, I was a trainee, my first shift in Portland. We didn't have these little red shirts, but we had ugly hats, and so everybody knew we were trainees. I came on that morning with lots of vim and vigor and a lot of confidence. Sometimes my confidence was misplaced, and I soon learned humbling experiences out on the drill ground. But on my 5th shift, it was Christmas Eve morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we get tapped out on a working fire. And there were 2 kids died in that fire. They happened to be the same age as mine at home. And it whacked me good one. And curiosity said, go in there and make sure. But there was a big truckman, make you look tiny. He just put his hand across the door and said, you're not going in there. So family took care of one another there. Now, 46 years later, I have no vim left, it's evaporated. All my vigor went the way of my hair, but I still have compassion. And I'm firmly in belief that within each one of us, there's a gene that's just loaded with compassion. It's loaded with that first responder gene. Because who else in their right mind would run into a burning building? Who would jump in the middle of blood and gore and do what they're trained to do? Not many people will do that, and they'll stand back and say, we are heroes. But then when we start taking on that title, we can do ourselves a disservice, because heroes don't cry, men don't cry. I grew up with that. My father was a career Navy man, and men don't cry, and men don't hug. And I came back to realize that that was something you step in out in the pasture. We each have things that we don't like to look back on. And for me, that was that first Christmas. I was off Christmas. I was so lucky. I was off Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. But it took some of the joy out. When I see my kids and realize there's 2 kids in Portland that aren't going to have that Christmas. So think back on some of those things, but don't dwell on them. Dwell on the things that are going to happen tomorrow. Forrest Grump's mama said, Forrest, life and death. Death is a part of life. Okay. The one about the chocolates I like too. But I handled stress when I first started being riding an ambulance in a rescue. I handled it rather well, I thought. My dog didn't think much of it because I'd come home and kick him. I found a man at church who was a paramedic out of Metro West. And he and I both started exchanging information and experiences, and we realized that we needed to talk these things out. So if we had, either one of us had a nasty run over the weekend or something, all it took was a telephone call. I need a cup of coffee. That was the signal. And we'd sit down and we'd debrief. The city of Portland at that time thought that PTSD was something we used on cardiac runs. They had no idea what post-traumatic stress was. They had no idea what stress was, especially on the guys on the rescue. We averaged 17 runs a shift on downtown, about 12 runs a shift on southeast. And you just don't have time. You just don't have time to reflect. My partner called me down one day and he said, and Heather talked about this earlier, he said, when you leave 10% of yourself emotionally at run number 1, and then you go to run number 2 and you leave 10% there, and then you go to run number 3 and you leave a little bit there, and then 4 and 5. He said, when we get a run that I need 100% of you, I want 100% of you. And if you don't have it to give me, you put the burden on me. And initially, I was offended because I can handle this. I can handle this. You know, it didn't take long. It didn't take long for that truth to nail me. There was a 14-year-old mommy who didn't know she was pregnant and she had a baby breech sitting on the toilet. I was first in. The baby was totally delivered except for the head, and I had to talk her into pushing a few more times. And she's crying, she's panicky, no parents in the house. She was a little on the plump side and had no idea what was going on. But I ended up doing CPR on that baby all the way to Kaiser Hospital in Southeast. And when I handed off the baby, they said, "You didn't tell us it was a preemie." And I said, "I didn't have time." And I walked into the ER and I'm standing there watching. It looked like something out of the Serengeti. All these carrion eaters on crops on this body. And I just stood there. And there was something that said, "You need to get out of here." And I walked into a linen closet right there and I broke down and I started sobbing. Well, there was another paramedic there and he came in, he put his arm around me and just said, go for it. Just let it go. And I cried and I cried and I cried. Got my composure back, walked back out, looked at it again, and this little nurse walks up to me and she said, would you come with me, please? And she took me back to the nurse's lounge and she says, let it go. And I sat on the couch and cried and cried and cried. It was my last shift before vacation. My wife and I went up to the San Juan Islands, and it was the most miserable time I've ever had. And I love the San Juan Islands. I couldn't look at the menu on the wall and make up my mind what I wanted to eat. Some friends over in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, knew a little bit about it. He was a chaplain with the county sheriff's office, and so he knew a little bit about it, and they talked me down. They inadvertently stumbled on the means of talking it out, getting rid of it. So have that person you can have a cup of coffee with. Have the realization of something's not right here, something is not right. Talk it out. And if that doesn't work, then talk to one of us, or talk to a counselor, but talk. Don't bottle it up. You can be a hero on the scene, but once you get back to quarters, be a human. I would much rather have somebody who was compassionate and soft emotionally than I have a Superman working on me. I found that the dog liked it much better if I debriefed before I got home. He was happy when I found my friend Bill to drink the coffee with. He actually wagged his tail when I pulled up. One day while I was reading the scriptures, I came across two passages. They both referred to the human body as the tent. 2 Peter and 2 Corinthians. The human body was the tent. This tent is going to be empty someday, so don't look for me. I'm not going to be there. And when I realized that, I saw things a lot differently on a run. When there was a fatal involved, or something near fatal, cardiac or something. And I realized that's an empty tent, and I'm not going to waste a tear on it. And it didn't make me hard. I still grieved for the family, but I knew that I couldn't do anything more to that tent because it's empty. And it helped me a lot to deal with a 4-year-old drowning, or a 6-month-old baby dying in my arms. It helped me to deal with it. I would cry. I would cry with the mom, but it helped me to deal with it. It didn't linger because I saw it in a different light. And I really suggest that. Read that scripture. 2 Peter 1:13 and then 2 Corinthians 5:1. It helps. It helps. Like Russ mentioned. It's that spiritual. I was glad that I had that to fall back on many times. I often prayed with the family. So the city didn't take a real happy view on that, but I did it anyway. So be a hero on the scene. Be soft when you get back to quarters. That's all.
So I got 20 minutes because I said you have the other here at 9 o'clock. So we're going to start with something fun.
Yay!
Glad.
Sandy Black
Why are they jumping all around?
So how many black dots are there? Yeah.
None.
I don't see any. Other than
So you
stairs.
wouldn't believe if I told you there were 3?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
I can see those.
So what do you see?
Butterfly.
Butterfly.
Guy playing a saxophone.
A saxophone?
The lady with the shadow.
Everybody see a lady and a saxophone?
Yep.
Well, there's a guy with the saxophone.
A guy with a saxophone.
It says lift.
It says
Are we
lift.
getting scored on this?
So everybody sees lift?
Yep.
You didn't see lift?
I see Andy in April in 30 years.
That's probably like me now.
So what do you see? So you see an old man and an old lady, right?
And then some guys getting down
You
on
see a
the
chalice? And you see a person sitting here with a comb thing on their head. And you see somebody here with a guitar. And then there's
Oh,
a,
yeah.
and there's a lady coming out of his ear.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like a bottle of tequila maybe. Just guessing by the attire, it could possibly be tequila. So which way is this guy looking? Is he looking at me or is he looking at you?
Yes.
Depends on your perspective.
Wow. No, he's looking out the window.
It's kind of freaky, isn't it? Old lady, young lady, what do you see?
I don't see the old one.
I choose to see the old one.
Okay, so how many people see the young lady?
Saw her first.
Okay, how many of you see the
Oh,
old
there
lady?
we go. Okay, yeah, I see it now.
How many see both? Everybody see both? Okay, so how do you, if someone, does anybody not see both? Ken doesn't see both, right?
I don't see either one. That's all That's all I see.
Yeah.
That's the young lady.
That's the young.
So he sees what? He sees the young lady?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do not see an old lady.
So take her.
Okay,
chin.
so
Exactly.
watch my pointer, Ken. So that's the old lady's chin.
Got it. Hey, I can see Jesus on the church and on.
That took me a long time to figure
I
out.
thought that was a cow.
It took me about 9 years living in the valley before I figured it out, but nobody else I ever ran with could.
Okay, so that was kind of fun, but what's the point of that?
It's all in perspective.
Perspective, right? So everybody's looking at the same set of facts on a page, but we're all interpreting it through our own set of glasses. And that's the way we look at scenes. We roll up and we make an assessment, we get involved, we do whatever we need to do, and then we process that, but where are we processing it? With our own set of glasses, right? So having the opportunity to be able to say, this was a hard scene for me, and someone else goes, it was nothing. It's like different perspective, right? And how do you understand that it was hard for somebody else? Well, by, like how we helped Ken see the old lady. We describe, we use words, we talk, and we say, this is how I experienced it. This is what I saw. This is how it touched me. So we use our words to do that. So we want to talk a little bit about peer support. And peer support, we've talked about that in general terms, just as building that resiliency or that capacity in your life that you have people that you can talk to. But peer support, and Chief Brumfield was talking about this, an after-action review. You all do after-action reviews?
Yes.
Should be happening every time, probably really informally in the rig on the way back from a scene. Just saying, hey, you know, what did you think when you were sitting? You realize why you say think and not feel? Because firefighters and first responders don't feel, we just think. But if you ask somebody, a first responder, what they think, they'll probably tell you what they're feeling. That's a little sneaky thing. So if you ask them what you're thinking, you get people talking. Because otherwise what we're doing is we're processing it in our own little cocoon as we roll back, right? And then you start asking some simple questions. You know, what went well? What didn't go so well? What could we have done differently? And you process, you go through the scene and the activities that took place, and you begin to let some of that stuff go just by processing it with the rest of your crew. So this is kind of a peer support. The C3, so it's C with 3 A's. So this is kind of an acuity, a mental acuity thing. You look at somebody and you can see that something is off. They're talking funny. They're either talking really loud, or they're talking really quiet, or they're really disorganized in how they're expressing themselves, or they're not able to say what they want to say. They're just stuck. That's a sign. Emotion. You have this dominant, I got to be in charge. I'm the one who's going to do whatever he's going to do, and everybody's going to listen to me. Or how appropriate their emotion is. They might have a really odd reaction to something, and all of a sudden they're laughing hysterically, and it's like, well, this isn't a funny scene. It might be a coping mechanism, but it also might say that something else is going on. The absence of emotion. Someone's just totally flat. There's no affect. What they're showing you is like there's nothing there, and you start to wonder, okay, how are they processing that? Euphoria, being really excited, depressed. We all know what that is. Anger, hostility, fear, anxiety, apprehension. That's that kind of uncertainty about what's coming next. And then it carries over to how we look. So in working with your crew, if somebody's showing up to work and they look like they've just been run over by a truck, so what's going on? You're looking for something, right? So, when they show up and their uniform's dirty, or their shoes are on the wrong feet, or they got the wrong colored socks on, or something is just off with how they look, and you go like, yeah, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is, but let's figure it out. This is where it gets so that we're not only taking care of ourselves, which is what we're talking about tonight, but we're also taking care of each other, because we need each other in order to be able to do our jobs. Us chaplains, we're kind of the people, sometimes the go-to people when things aren't going well for you, but we need each other. I have a group of 4 other pastors that I meet with every week that I can tell them anything, and if I'm telling them crap, they'll smack me up the side of the head and tell me to straighten up. But they're my accountability group. They can talk straight to me. But they're going to call me on stuff if something is not right, if something looks off, there's a reason for that. And so if you're seeing something that doesn't fit, Jamie, you were talking about going home and cracking a beer. Probably a pretty normal thing for a lot of people. It's when you crack a second or a third, and it's out of the norm. So, if it's your pattern, every day after work I go home and I sit down and have a beer and eat supper or whatever it is, great. If you're having 3 or 4 or 5, something is different, something has changed. And so that's what you need to watch for. And watch for that with each other as well. If you go out for lunch as a crew and all of a sudden someone's ordering something that's not quite okay, I wonder what's going on. That's different. Pay attention to those kinds of things. And if you see something, don't just let it blow by. Ask about it. You don't have to go like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. It's like, so tell me what's going on. We don't usually do this. Something's different. And ask that question and invite them to be vulnerable. And then looking at alertness. How someone, so I was doing mediation between a mom and a daughter. We were sitting at a round table. And what had happened was the girl had run away and she'd come back. The reason she ran away because she got caught smoking a joint, and her mom had told her that she was disgusting. And so the girl ran away. And so we come back together and mom says, well, that's what I said, but that's not what I meant. I meant the fact that you were smoking a joint was disgusting to me. You're not. You're my daughter. I love you. But at that same meeting, so talking about how you're oriented towards people, the daughter's sitting full on the table looking at mom. Mom's like this. Daughter's over there, and she's like turned away from her. And it's like, and her daughter called her on it. It's like, so what are you doing? So pay attention to how people are engaging with you. If people are standing and they're locked down, or they're really tight, or they're, you look at their posture, their shoulders are drooping, or they just look exhausted. Ask what's going on. Hey, this doesn't look like it normally does. It's different. Ask what's going on, and then if you have a response that says something's going on, help them either sit there and listen to them. And I'll tell you, one of the first things I learned about being a chaplain is that the greatest gift that you can give to somebody is to listen to them. So when I was, it's a long time ago, I was an intern chaplain at a hospital up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so one of the things we had to do when we were chaplain is we had to take one weekend when we were on call for emergencies at the hospital. Of course, we're all praying our pagers aren't going off, right? Because we don't want to go to somebody's dead thing at the hospital. And so, of course, my pager goes off. I go down there, and there's these two little ladies who had been celebrating. One of them was, I think, an 85th birthday, and the other one had a heart attack, and she died. And she actually had the heart attack in the cab, died in the cab. Cab drove straight to the hospital, didn't stop, got her there. They worked her full code, and nothing. She was dead. So they called me to come in and talk to her friend. And I remember what I did. I came in and I said, so tell me what happened. And she talked for about 2 hours. I don't think I said more than 3 or 4 words. At the end, because I was a chaplain, I asked her if I could pray with her, and she said yes. I prayed with her, and her family came and got her and took her home. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from her family telling me about how much they appreciated all that I'd done for their mother. And I was trying to think, what did I do? I sat there and I listened. And sometimes that's the hardest thing you can do, because you want to do something else, because it's hard to just sit there and listen, because typically we're fixers, right? So we want to tell them how to fix something. So if someone's telling me something and I say, well, you should try this or this or this, and it's like, no, just shut up and listen. Just let them talk and acknowledge that they're struggling with something. Boy, that sounds like that's really hard. That sounds like that's really, really a hard place to be. Gosh, that must be terrible to be there. And just acknowledge the fact that what they were experiencing is not normal. Their reaction is normal, because when we see horrible stuff and it breaks us, that's a normal reaction to abnormal stuff. And what we have to figure out is how we can put ourselves back together. We help each other doing that. We help particularly by listening to each other. So my wife and I are the only ones left in my house now, and I'll be sitting and watching TV, and my wife is like, okay, so if I'm going to listen to my wife, I have to turn the TV off. So I turn it off, and I turn and I look at her, and I give her my full attention, and we have a conversation. If the TV's on, it's an argument, right? In my brain, because my brain is over here, and she's talking over here, and I'm not giving her full attention. I'm not really paying attention to TV either, but I'm totally distracted and not paying any attention to what she's saying. And it's a simple thing as either muting the TV or just turning away from it and focusing on what she's saying. So take the time to listen to each other. It's a huge, huge thing. Just looking at the kind of decision making someone is doing, what you see, they're doing odd stuff or different stuff that's out of the ordinary. The out of the ordinary things are those signposts, those flags that we look for when somebody's not in a good place. So there's a lot of words on there. I'm not going to read them all to you. But I do have handouts if you want them. So I made it, I killed half a tree.
Gratitude.
I did, yeah.
She's always people person.
So I have that, if any of you want it, I'm going to have it up here. I'm not going to pass it out because I'm not going to waste paper by you guys throwing it away. If you want it, come and get it. It's available to you. It has a lot of suggestions about how to take care of, and it puts up there 6 different areas of your life, right? The psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional, and physical. So all of the things that we've already talked to and a couple more that are probably encapsulated in 2 or 3 of the other ones. But it's just some of the things that you can do to take care of yourself. There's some suggestions there that I was reading through and they sounded pretty good. All right, so here's some resources for you. So where it says 24/7 after our names, that means that we have agreed that we are available 24/7. So if you call us at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're not going to cuss you out. It might be hard for us to wake up, but if you call us, we're going to respond. So if you need to talk, that means that we're available 24/7. So if you want, what I would suggest, because I didn't print this out, I think, I would say take out your phone and take a picture. Because you've got all of our cell phone numbers there. There's also the employee assistance program, so that's through the city, and all of us qualify for that. We're all city employees, and even if we're volunteers, we're city employees, and so we qualify for that plan. And then there's some other counseling services. Kathy Canning, Heather has some personal knowledge of her, and she has some experience working with PTSD. Tim Dietz was recognized, and Garen Whiteman. Garen is a woman. She's a psychologist. Both of those people have a lot of experience working with first responders. So they have some expertise and they understand the culture, because the culture is different and an average counselor doesn't understand our culture. And so for them to be able to give you some helpful direction may not work in our world. So those are some folks that do. The challenge with Tim, I think he's really good, but he doesn't take insurance, so it's out-of-pocket kind of money that you have to pay in order to be able to see him. Dr. Garen Wheatland, she takes all kinds of insurance, so does Kathy. And when you contact the Employee Assistance Program, they're supposed to direct you to people that are appropriate for us as well.
Oh, can you back up just one second? Thanks. I don't, okay.
Let me send it to you.
I didn't want a picture, I wanted to do it now. I'm gonna start texting my 24/7 people. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm changing my number.
You probably
have to
will
wake
get a
up,
response. She missed that part, Rose.
You got it? Dina, you good?
Yeah, I just, hold on, all right. Oops. Okay, I just wrote Dennis's down, I'll do it.
You can text too, by the way.
That's what I said, 2 a.m. text.
Yeah, text.
Text.
You can even test your texting at 2 a.m.
Okay, so I actually printed these out so you can have them. So this came from a professional who works with first responders, and some apps that are helpful for you that you can use. And I actually took pity on those iPhone people because some of them need extra help. So we have a set for Apple users, and we have a set for Android folks as well. So there's some things, and I have a handout, so you can actually take it with you when you go home. Let's see. Did you get the picture, Jamie?
I took a picture of the Android one with my Apple, so I'll give the hand.
I can go back if you want.
I'll get the hand out.
All right. So this is a tool. It's the rationale behind this tool is it's been developed for people who have experienced a traumatic event. It's intended to be used about a month after the event happens. But you can go through and you can look, and if you score 6 on a total of 6 of any of those things, that probably means that you're suffering from at least some level of PTSD.
PTS.
PTS, yes. Post-traumatic syndrome.
It's
print this one out too?
It's not disorder.
Pardon me?
It's
You print this one out too?
I did, yes. So I have a couple of handouts. So there was one that I handed out when I did my minute for the Chaplain's Minute 2 months ago. I know that not all of you got it, so I have some extra ones of that if you want to, or if you didn't ever do anything with it, you can pick one up. And it's just kind of a self-check kind of thing. There's a lot of things that we do to cope with life. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not. Doing anything to excess is probably not. Whether it's hiking to excess, whether it's consuming alcohol or other consumables, whether it's food or drugs, be cautious of monitoring yourself and how you're dealing with stress. Recognize what your techniques are for dealing with it, and evaluate them as to whether or not they're helpful or not. And if it's not working for you, do something different. You all know Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting something different to happen. So if it's not working, do something different and you'll get a different result. So it is 30 seconds to 9 o'clock. And we're done. So if you want any handouts, I got handouts for a bunch of stuff up here. I have some stuff for critical incident stress. So some of the signs that you see, so things like depression, things like decreased or increased appetite, consumption of alcohol, other drugs, just a whole raft. It's about 50 things list that potentially could put you on that level of saying that you're having a reaction to stress. So I said I'd stop talking at 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock, so I'm stopping talking unless you guys want to ask questions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if any of the other chaplains, or you can come and talk to us afterwards. Done, Chris. minute and a half late? Oh, I am. I was looking at that one.
So thank you to the chaplains group. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for sticking through it.
Please make sure you sign the roster before you leave, and if you're gonna get a beanie and wanted one,